Welcome, everybody. So this is going to be episode 1 of the Invisible Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And in this podcast, we are going to explore all aspects about martial arts that we don't quite see during our mat time. We're going to take quite an introspective look at what martial arts is and how a human benefits from martial arts, and hopefully really, take a deep dive into some really important topics today. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. And this first episode is going to be all about beginning our journey. So you are a beginner to this, right? Whether you're within your first few months, or whether you have never trained a day in your life, right? What are some things that you can expect? What are some things you want to think about before you start? What might be some red flags of things you want to avoid? And we can really start talking about what sort of goals we want to set for ourselves. Like what sort of things we want to get out of our practice, how often we want to practice, what might be our long-term plan in terms of, starting training. And it could be jiu-jitsu, it could be Shaolin Kung Fu, it could be Tai Chi, it could be, judo. It really doesn't necessarily matter, the martial art, but we are beginning our journey here. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you for sticking around. And hopefully you guys get something out of this here. So I'm definitely looking forward to starting this and helping you guys out the best way I know how. So I have been training martial arts now since I'm 5, and I'm 32 years old now. When my parents had put me in martial arts, I seem to be, at least, I don't quite remember, but from my parents' words, I was definitely an emotional kid, constantly struggling with something and whining about something. I didn't get along well with other kids, so they decided, something that was more individual might help me out. And then a few years later, probably around 10 years old, I came into, Bruce Lee, his movies, his philosophy. And, something rang, a bell was struck, a chord was rang, and I realized that Bruce, he had something that people around me just didn't have, right? That adults around me just didn't have. And, I can't recall in particular if it was something that, I saw within the training room I was in at that time, but the philosophy that he brought to the table really, really resonated with me. And I think it was from that point forward where I was like, yeah, this is my path. This is what I'm doing here. So, whatever brought you into martial arts, that's cool. A majority of people, they're watching MMA nowadays. And that's something that brings them in, or, sometimes a lot of people, what I hear a lot is they've been going to the gym. They're really bored with it. They want to get in shape, but, they figured, well, why not learn something? That's quite a popular story. Another thing is people just want to learn how to defend themselves, or they're watching the UFC and they're like, all right, I want to get punched in the face. So what else can I do? And they turn to jiu-jitsu. So whatever your reason is for wanting to get involved in martial arts, that's cool, because there's so many benefits to be had. And a lot of the times we may come in for one thing and get a lot more than we bargained for, in a good way, right? And sometimes not so good way, but we'll talk about all those things. So congrats to you on starting your martial arts journey, right? It's quite an amazing thing. And, to be quite frank, another reason I started this, right, is because I grew up in a traditional martial arts setting, right? Like you said yes, sir, and no, sir, and you bowed before you stepped on the mat. There was never any fooling around. There was extreme discipline, and self-control was very much at the forefront of the culture within the training room. And you trained hard, and you kept your mouth shut, and you worked your butt off. And then, afterwards, talking could be had. And, so it's very different nowadays. And even within my own school, it's very different. I don't expect people to say yes, sir, or no, sir. I don't expect people to bow onto the mat. And I think that a lot of the values that traditional martial arts embody are lost now, right? And I would especially say within the MMA community, and even so the jiu-jitsu community. And why is that, right? I think that these days, when we want to learn martial arts, it's because we see it as a sport, right? The art side has kind of been put by the wayside. The warrior mindset is not so much spoken about. It's really about a competitor's mindset. So, I hope with this podcast I can bring back some of that ancient wisdom that made me start and keeps me going to this day. In fact, it's the very thing that keeps me going is discovering who I am on a deeper level, discovering, that I am not so different than everyone else around me, and how martial arts can truly be a way for the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual aspects of a human being, right? And if we're not here to evolve, then I don't really know why we would be doing any of this, right? So, again, kudos to you guys to making that first step. So, you're not even a white belt yet, let's say. You're just starting jiu-jitsu or whatever martial art it is, and you're looking for a school to train. What are some things that you, as an individual, can start looking for so that you really feel comfortable? And guys, this is something that I tell people that walk in my door all the time, right? I ask them, have you gone to any other schools? And if they say yes, okay, I'm like, awesome, nice. Like, how have you been doing so far? And, they normally say something pretty generic, like, oh, no, it's been good. I'm just looking around. But if they say no, I tell people like, hey, this is a pretty cool thing that you're doing. And, congrats, but it's not a bad idea to go into other schools and see the different cultures of the gym, see the different training styles and instructor styles and the atmosphere and tip number one for you guys would be don't jump the gun, right? Like, hey, if you go into a school and you have a blast and, the guys are really friendly, the place looks clean, the schedule works out for your busy life, and it's the martial art that you want to pursue, and, those boxes are checked, by all means, sign up. Obviously, financial things come into consideration. Is it affordable? But on the other hand, right, don't just say like, oh, I don't have time to go check out another place. I guess I'll just train here, right? Like, you really want to feel like that is the place for you, right? So if you're kind of on the fence and you're just kind of maybe feeling pressured to sign up because you're there, that might not be the best of moves. If the instructor is super pushy when it comes to selling a membership, maybe, I'm not saying that, we're running businesses, so we have to feed our families too and support our instructors. So obviously there's going to be some form of sale happening. You're purchasing a membership. But if, the person's in your face and really pushy and trying to make you feel bad for not joining, they don't even know you yet. So consider how they might act when they do get to know you. or how that sort of attitude might trickle down into the training room or their teaching or whatever it may be. So, the car salesman approach tends to turn people off a little bit. But again, right? This is just advice to some things to reflect on, right? What are some other things to look at when you guys first walk into a martial arts school? As I mentioned before, the cleanliness, right? If you look around and there's like dust everywhere and, dirty clothes laying all over the place and no trash is picked up and, it's kind of like, gives you frat house vibes. I think that, and this is something that was extremely important in a traditional setting, was you respected the place that you trained at, right? And that was kind of the aspect of bowing on the mat, was you give gratitude and you give thanks and you give respect to the place that you get to evolve as a martial artist, right? So that value, I think, is really important, guys. And if maybe, the place is a pigsty, maybe that value isn't there. Maybe they don't quite respect, their sanctuary. And that also could be reflected in some other ways, right? What else? So the training room, right? Now, for me, excuse me, I'm drinking coffee here. For me, there are many, many, many variations of a training room, right? And the culture of the school, the instructor, right? Like all of this has a lot to do with it. And you have to ask yourself, like, what am I looking for here, right? If your goal is to become an ADCC champion, right, you should look at that training room and say, well, are there other people in this place that want to be jiu-jitsu competitors? Maybe they have an advanced class that's like dedicated towards jiu-jitsu competitors. Maybe when, competitions come around, they add another class to the schedule that is designed for competition, right? Awesome. It fits your goals, right? This is really what I'm trying to say. Maybe if you're a little older, right, and you're not trying to go balls to the wall with young 20-year-olds, you don't want to get hurt, you have a family of 5 kids and you're working full time, and maybe you have some old injuries from a car accident or playing too much sports or whatever it may be, are the people around educated on exercise, on recovery, on keeping a good balance for, say, a beginner's class or a mixed levels class, of, giving people the option to not drive them to redline their body, right? So one of the things, that I grew up doing, and granted, like I was young, I was training MMA, right? Like before I found jiu-jitsu, I was kickboxing for 20 years. I actually came into, Shaolin Kempo first. It was like a mix of Shaolin Kung Fu and Kempo, which kind of turned into Muay Thai kickboxing and MMA, and then found jiu-jitsu, right? So for me, I wanted to work out super hard. I wanted to train like all the time and full contact, and right. But obviously your goals are important to consider. So if you're a little older and that necessarily isn't your goal, are there other people like you there, right, that you can train with in a controlled way and not feel like, you're constantly in this crazy paced training room? Another thing, right, especially if you're a beginner, do they have classes that are for beginners, right? Now, I know a lot of traditional martial arts rooms, right, and I grew up in them, where kids and adults are on the mat at the same time, right? So you might be a 40-year-old man and you're partnering with like a 12-year-old. That, not that I want to say that that's bad, but you're just simply not going to be able to fully apply techniques on someone so young. And if half of the training room is children and half of the training room is adults, granted, if you're kicking and punching in the air, like your technique, you can be great at shadow boxing. But in terms of applying real sparring, that might be hard to do for you. Maybe, they don't have a fundamentals class or a class dedicated to white belts only, right? And they just kind of throw you into the fire and expect you to, fight without technique or live roll without technique. That's going to be very hard to do. And that's a really, really easy way to get injured. So a great thing, right? And this is something that I try and recommend to people is like, I give the analogy of like BMXers, like going through like trail jumps or something throughout the woods. If I have training wheels on my bike because I don't know how to ride a bike yet or keep my balance, why would I try and apply that to going off a huge jump or a stair set or, grind down a handrail or something? Like it's just not applicable, right? Now, maybe you're a wrestler and you have previous grappling experience. That's completely different. Maybe you don't know any jujitsu, but you know how to move someone's body. You know how to move your own body. It's a little bit different. So there's a lot of circumstances that we want to kind of think about here, right? Well, what is your schedule like? This is something I brought up earlier. Maybe there's only like one class a day, right? And it would be stressful for you working around your work schedule to make it happen, right? And guys, one of the biggest things that you really want to do is build consistency, right? Because martial arts is all about skill building, right? It's about honing your body, creating discipline within your routine, and really striving with intention for what you want to get out of it and what techniques you want to learn, right? And it doesn't matter what martial art it is, that stays the same. So if you can't do that because it's too inconvenient for you to get to class, then you should probably do one or two things. One, either look for a school that fits better within your schedule, or learn to, if you can, and if you have that option, to manipulate your schedule so that you can, rearrange some things so you can make it to class consistently. I recommend doing that as well. And this is simply for one reason. If you are not developing the skill that you want and you feel like you're not learning fast enough, it's a little discouraging to make your way to class, right? So, or you just feel like things aren't moving quickly enough. And this is one thing to consider here, guys, is martial arts, the ceilings are infinite, right? So when we're on this path of progression and self-evolution, realize that you may break a plateau, and then someone comes around and teaches you that you don't know shit, right? And then that same person that teaches you that lesson, they also work with someone that teaches them that same lesson, and so on and so forth. So, the arts are constantly evolving. And I think in terms of traditional martial arts, the essence has truly been lost. And, this is to say a lot about, traditional techniques. Maybe it's Kung Fu, maybe it's Aikido, right? And people look at these things and they're like, this is complete BS and it would never work. Well, that might be partially true, right? But a lot of people don't realize that so much of this stuff over the years have been watered down. And these people that aren't true practitioners have started taking in this knowledge, turning it into something that it's actually not, and then passing it down through generations and doing an extreme disservice. So, back in the day, there were true masters that really, they were training for life or death scenarios. They were training for war, right? And this stuff was applied in real life. So not all of it is BS, such as what we might see on like a McDojo, compilation reel or something like that, scrolling through Instagram or whatever it may be, where we see all this BS, and there's so much of it out there. And that goes for jiu-jitsu too, right? Where you might have an instructor that is like watching YouTube videos and teaching right off the YouTube video. So it's really important, guys, that you get this deep sense of skill building, and you're seeing this skill build consistently. It doesn't have to be fast, right? But consistency is one of the most important things that you guys want to focus on in the beginning, right? And one of the things that I talk about a lot in my own classroom, and this is something to really focus on, is your intention, meaning what techniques do I want to master, right? Because in the beginning, your goal is to have the fundamentals structurally sound. So if we were talking about jiu-jitsu, controlling an opponent is far more important than learning how to armbar somebody, right? Learning how to take someone's back and hold it is far more important than learning a rear naked choke. Those things have its place, but there is a foundation in every single martial art. So in boxing, it's your stance, it's how you move, it's how you hold your hands and weave your head and work your footwork and, the jab and the 4 fundamental punches, and how you can build a strong foundation in moving and controlling, the movements of your opponent, right? In jiu-jitsu, it's very similar. Well, what would be your stance? It's your positions, right? So mount, side control, back control, close guard, butterfly, half guard, right? So there are these fundamental positions that are like super, super important to dial in on right away. And it's easy to come across like really fancy moves and want to learn all of it. And you simply bypass the stuff that might seem a little bit boring. And it's important not to do that, right? It's important to take your time and learn how to control an opponent. So this is where fundamental classes are just super, super important, right? So you get in twice a week, 3 times a week is really a great place to start. Whenever someone comes into my school and they ask, well, do you guys have a once a week membership? It's like, yes, but not really. And this is simply because if I was a trainer in anything, I wouldn't want my client to be working on that something for once a week, right? Like if Tuesday night is your night to do it and that's all you can possibly do, okay, something is better than nothing. But if you really want to take this journey seriously and you really want to get something out of it, right? Then, maybe you do once a week and you talk to the instructor and see if you can get a private lesson or something to really like reinforce what you learned on Tuesday night and it works around your schedule a little bit better, great. But if you were going to the gym and you wanted to get in shape or actually get strong, once a week isn't going to do anything for most people, or you're not going to see progression. If you don't see progression, you might get a little deterred. You might get unmotivated. Say Tuesday night's your only night and you have to skip because there's holidays coming up or work or your kid has a soccer game or you're taking a vacation and now you miss, the next Tuesday and the following Tuesday. It's like, okay, well now I'm out 3 weeks before I can train again. So you guys understand what I'm saying here is the consistency super important. So if you decide to take this journey, definitely try and do your due diligence with, getting in that mat time, and nothing can replace mat time, right? So let's get into that intention a little bit, right? Like here's what a lot of people don't realize. Our minds tend to jump all over the place, right? And I'll give you guys a great example, and this might resonate with a lot of men out there. Your girlfriend or your wife sends you into the grocery store, right? She's like, okay, we need eggs, we need milk, and we need, 2 peppers and a cucumber. And for some reason, you go into the grocery store and you walk out with like toilet paper and a tomato and like an energy drink and, some random stuff, and you get like half the list. Or it's like, oh, she wanted milk, but you got half and half instead. She asked for eggs, and for some reason you got them hard boiled. And it's like, okay, like you tried your best, man. Like, but you get back and you show your wife what you got, and she's like, well, what about this? And you're like, oh man, I forgot. Right? Like, it's a common experience for a lot of people, right? Myself included at a certain point. That, I mean, depending on where I'm at, sometimes it happens to this day. But what is that? You have a list, right? You have something on your phone, or you wrote it on a piece of paper, or they texted it to you, and it's like, it's not that I forgot, but I did. I knew walking in, I knew what I needed, but what is it that makes us have such a hard time getting that list 110% correct? What is it that gives us such a hard time at dialing our attention on one particular technique? Let's say close guard. Very good technique, position to know for a beginner, right? Well, it's the value of our attention, right? So, for example, when you read the list before you go into the store, your attention is dialed in on the list, right? You read it and you're like, simple enough. And then you go into the grocery store, and what happens? Attention is diverted into many, many different things. You pass by a tomato and you're like, oh, maybe I'll make some pasta later, right? And all of a sudden you walk right by the cucumber, right? Or, your wife sends you for milk and you pass by, whatever it is that's near the milk is some yogurt. And you're like, oh, no, like I really like yogurt, right? And you walk right by the milk. And it's like, well, what is it? Your attention is divided in many, many, many different places because there's so many things around you. There's music playing. There's people walking by. There's maybe, a sale on something you didn't even consider. And all of a sudden you see something and you start getting hungry and you grab something to snack on while you're shopping. And all of these different stimulations start to come into the mind and start to veer the mind off of the original mission, right? Which was maybe eggs, right? What we say, eggs, milk, cucumbers, and 2 peppers, right? And because the attention is divided and the mind begins to jump from one place to the next, right? We can't seem to dial in what it is that we need to be walking out of the store with, right? So as a martial artist, and this is why, guys, if you look at all the ancient masters of martial arts, right, true masters, there is always a philosophy of improving one's focus, of understanding the mind, of understanding thought, of understanding intention and discipline, and the inner standing of a human, of yourself as a person, right? And if we walk into the grocery store, right, and we don't know how to direct our attention in the correct places because too many things start distracting us, we don't get the result that we want, which is what is on the grocery list, right? Same thing in the martial arts room. You walk in, like, okay, it's close guard week. And the second you start rolling with someone or you start training, and all of these new circumstances, all of these new positions and things start to overwhelm you, right? You go into a fight or flight response. Your adrenaline kicks up. Your breathing gets extremely constricted, or you become out of breath and you're tired. And these are the things that start overwhelming a person and veers them away from the grocery list, or veers them away from the intention of the skill building, which we mentioned would be close guard, right? So, this really is the essence of creating discipline with intention, meaning I fix my attention in a narrowed direction towards improvement of a particular skill, right? But you have to understand that when the monkey mind starts to jump around from tree to tree, right, and it gets distracted, you can't do that simply. And that in itself is a skill that takes time and it takes consistent effort, right? And this is something as a martial artist, and I know, this is catered towards beginners, but this is really important here, guys, because you want to improve as fast as possible, especially if you don't have the time, right? Is building a habit of inner awareness of what thoughts are passing through your head, right? Do you say, oh, close guard's too hard? Every time I put someone in close guard, they break out of it. So then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, it didn't work the first time, so it's not going to work the second time. And you do something that's more natural to you for the sake of not losing, because when you try close guard, maybe they pass your guard, right? So we naturally tend to veer away from things that make us uncomfortable and from places that we feel we don't have control from, right? And this is a great analogy for our everyday life as well, right? As they say, right, our biggest growth is when we step out of our comfort zone, right? So if you're a guard player and you love the close guard and all of a sudden you use half guard or de la riva or open guards and you get your guard passed over and over, next time you're like, oh, it's just easier if I go back to close guard and just do what I do, right? And that's a great way to get a good close guard, but eventually we want to expand. We want to adapt and be able to find victory in positions that we aren't familiar with, right? So maybe you need to develop the skill of podcasting so that you can relay your message more clearly and efficiently to people, right? Where maybe you don't want to spend time on the computer and talking into a microphone and, right? Such as my situation, right? But I realize that I also don't want to sit on my butt and not get important information out to people. So we have to step outside of our comfort zone in order to truly build our character with being okay in positions we are not comfortable with. Maybe it's a job interview. Maybe it is an uncomfortable conversation you have to have with your spouse, right? So this truly, teaches us this ability of adjusting, right? And finding a way through things that we may not normally be okay finding our way through, right? So, everyone knows this like water analogy given by Bruce Lee, right? Where he says, be like water, right? Making its way through the cracks. Do not be assertive, but adjust to the object, and you shall find a way around or through it, right? So this adaptability, right, to obstacles and things that we may have to allow us to take a new shape, to take a new approach, to use creativity, but not resist those very things that give us troubles, right? So this is what I mean here by invisible jujitsu, guys. This is what I mean here by developing your character through martial arts. There are so many hidden things and aspects and principles that truly can take someone from just training for sport and training for life and becoming the best versions of themselves. And that's truly what it means to unlock one's fullest potential, is by looking at things in this introspective way, right? Another quote, if you guys are familiar with Morihei Ueshiba, which is the founder of Aikido, right? And, I heard this one probably at 12 or 13, and I was like, yeah, this is, true victory is victory over oneself. And to this day, I think about that on a daily basis, because there are these sticking points. There are these resisting points and patterns of consciousness that constantly arise within our thought process, right? These patterns of thought that keep us stuck in the position that we are in, right? I'm too scared to let go of my closed guard and use a de la Riva, right? Therefore, right, I find myself in these positions of being defeated, right? When I wind up in that new circumstance or that position of unfamiliarity, right? So truly, guys, we can use martial arts as a tool, as a catalyst for our growth in every single aspect of our lives. And that's really what this podcast is all about. I definitely will bring on certain guests, or friends and training partners and people that, maybe share the same wavelength, or they can just share their perspective. And fortunately for us, this wisdom is not completely lost. You just have to dig, right? Because in mainstream, nowadays, it's about who beat who has status, who has fame, who has power, who has the most money, right? And these are values that were literally never spoken about within a martial arts setting, right? It was really always about the process, right? And it may sound cliche and a little corny to some people, but the journey, how you adapt as a person, your ability to commit to building skill and bringing yourself out of your comfort zone, that is the things that most people should focus on, right? A lot of people don't know about Bodhidharma, right? He was in the 5th, 6th century and a Buddhist monk, and the one who brought the very Shaolin Kung Fu to Buddhist monasteries, right? This is essentially where most of the martial arts we see today originated, right? And one of the things that you can find is he said that one must not focus on the end result, but rather the spirit of the process, right? And this is truly the warrior's journey, a true warrior, not a warrior that looks to conquer others, but as Morihei Ueshiba said, one who looks to conquer himself, and not through crazy resistance, as Bruce Lee said, but like water, right? Taking the path of least resistance, right? And the gentle art, guys, is jujitsu. And if you're a jujitsu practitioner, you understand this. So we're going to be taking this approach. I'm going to be doing these as much as I can. And I hope that it motivates you guys to consider your training from a new light, to truly benefit in more ways than maybe just winning a competition, right? Because this approach creates the best mindset for fighting under new scenarios, because it creates freedom. The freedom from your thoughts, the freedom from an enemy that actually isn't a true enemy, but is an illusion. Why? Because when someone stands across from you in a competition, they aren't someone that is in your way. They are someone that is going to contribute to the process of you developing skill. And those are two different mindsets. If that person is in your way, you will meet them with force, right? You will meet the thoughts in your head with resistance. And you will be trying to prove people wrong or prove you're the best. And that actually, believe it or not, is the exact opposite of being like water, right? But when you view every opponent as an opportunity, as a gift to develop your skill set, to develop yourself, to conquer yourself, right? To have true victory, that then, and only then, right, is really when you start to develop as a martial artist. So, we're 45 minutes in here, and I think we got to the essence of what it is. that we are going to cover here on the Invisible Jiu-Jitsu podcast. Hopefully, the advice towards the beginners was really helpful for you guys, right? And that it's something that you guys will consider as you start on your journey. But that's it for today. Why don't you guys stick around for next time? And we'll keep on digging, guys. Okay? And as we do more and more of these, feel free to reach out. Ask any questions you have. And give us some topics. Give me some topics that we can cover. Can be personal questions or whatever it may be. Competition related, fitness related, recovery related, technique related, inner development related, whatever it may be. Throw it my way, and I'm happy to answer what I can. Keep training hard. Keep that discipline going. Keep your spirits high, and I'll see you guys around for next time. Thanks.